Hello, everybody, and welcome to No Rest for the Wicked, a brand new Souls-like action RPG from Moon Studios, who are the creators of Ori. Now, before we get too far into talking about why I called it a Souls-like and what this game actually is, I gotta tell you guys that I will be playing No Rest for the Wicked March 1st, Friday, around 9:30 a.m. Pacific. So the Wicked Showcase is taking place on March 1st at 9 a.m. Pacific, and I will be streaming that live. So I'll be live right from 8:30 a.m. Pacific, and then we're going to be going all day. And we're going to listen to the showcase. I assume that's when we'll find out the early access release date. We'll find out a bit more information than we do now. And maybe we'll find out where that ARPG stuff is coming from and where the Soul stuff is coming from. But after the showcase, which will be about 30 minutes, I will be playing No Rest for the Wicked. Just uncut, no pre-recorded, no nothing. So if you want to see pure gameplay and my pure first impressions, make sure to stop by the stream at 9 a.m. Pacific, because that is what we're going to be doing. If you are not able to get there at that time, totally get it. It's 9 a.m. on a work day, Pacific time. So if you do end up missing it, I will be putting out a first impressions video on this channel. That will be the next video after this one. I'll also be doing a write-up tweet right after if you want to follow me on Twitter. And if you have any questions at all about the game, please do put them in the comments of this video, because I'll go through them and keep them in mind while I'm playing. And then maybe I'll even do a Q&A kind of video about the game later. So I'm very, very, very excited. Now let's continue talking about what game this is. You'll notice I said Souls-like for this introduction to the game. So let's start with first why I said that. IGN is working with the Ori devs on multiple different videos on the lead up to the Wicked Showcase, which is on March 1st. And in one of those videos, when they were talking about Wicked's combat, the devs mentioned that the game's combat is inspired by Souls games and Monster Hunter. It's deliberate, you wait for openings, you learn boss attacks to be successful, it's punishing, it requires precision. These are all words that we hear when it comes to Souls-like combat, where you can't just go in there and button mash. It's not a hack and slash. It's a game that you have to be methodical in the way that you approach all of your combat encounters. The top-down view of this game instantly makes you think of games more akin to Diablo. Recently, I was streaming Last Epoch, and people were like, oh, so No Rest for the Wicked is basically like Last Epoch. No, it's quite different, and the devs have been very specific about that. They've said that they want to make a different type of ARPG. When we think of ARPGs, we think of games that have a lot of stuff going on at the screen all at once, lots of enemies, big AoE. There's a lot of procedural generation with it, because the idea is that you're just farming for loot, farming for better builds, grinding dungeons, whereas No Rest for the Wicked is all handcrafted levels. Level design is super important to these developers. They wanted to make sure that they take you through the story, they take you through the world, so they can really build up everything and let you know what kind of world this is, what the characters are, what their intentions are. So all of the levels are absolutely handcrafted. And I could kind of guess this from the gameplay video that IGN put out, because when I was watching the gameplay, this was before we had confirmation that the devs got inspiration from Souls games and Monster Hunter, but I was watching it and I was like, this level design looks very Soulsy. And then we got to the boss fight against Warwick the Torn, and I was like, yeah, that's very Soulsy combat. So we were absolutely correct in thinking that this game is a more Souls-like experience than a traditional ARPG experience that you may think of, but it's pretty clear that these devs are setting out to make something quite unique in this space. Now, I will admit that using the term Souls-like isn't entirely accurate. This isn't something like Lies of P or Lords of the Fallen, where it's clearly following the Souls formula entirely, but the combat, the four-way D-pad item UI, and the level design is all very much so based in Souls. The things that are missing for me for calling it a Souls-like are the dropping of currency on death. We haven't seen a death yet, so we don't actually know what happens on death. But in the character screen, there appears to be currencies that just look like different coins to me, and that doesn't really give me a reason to believe that you're going to drop those on death. And in terms of leveling up, you can clearly see that you have an XP bar that goes up when you kill enemies, so you're not going to drop any kind of level up material either. That doesn't mean that there won't be anything dropped on death, but I just haven't seen anything yet that implies that will be the case or that there'll even necessarily be a downside to dying besides maybe having to start your checkpoint over again. We can also see that there's cooking in the game, not something we normally see in a Souls-like, as well as loot rarity, which we can see throughout the gameplay trailer, which is much more similar to that kind of traditional action RPG that we're used to seeing. No Rest for the Wicked seems to be one of those games that are taking heavy inspiration from Souls games, but aren't necessarily taking enough to be considered a straight up Souls-like. After all, the devs did specifically say that they are making an ARPG that you've never played before. So I don't really see where the ARPG comes in yet in the case that I'm thinking of Diablo, Last Epoch, Lost Ark. Maybe the end game will feel more ARPG-y, but to me, this very much just kind of screams a top-down Souls adjacent experience. But either way, listening to these developers talk about their intentions behind combat design, level design, art, lighting, the way that they use different colors, you can just tell that they get it. And you can see that they get it from Ori and the Blind Forest and then Ori and Will of the Wisps. The whole thing is just beautiful. The game is absolutely astoundingly beautiful in its art style. They managed to draw emotions from you with characters that are basically not even saying anything. And in the most recent IGN video, it's actually quite interesting that the developers said that this kind of emitting emotion from you from characters is really important for them. And they got to kind of do that in Ori, but this time around, these are human characters. They have human stories. It's very black and white, and they want it to really be telling you a story rather than just kind of emitting emotion through animation, music, vibe. I mean, Ori made me cry, so I can only imagine that this game's probably gonna hit me in the feelings. Now, what else can we expect from this game? We've got a couple of more interviews before we hit Friday, which is the showcase, which I'm sure we will find out everything. But there's a couple of little interesting tidbits. They actually started work on No Rest for the Wicked at the end of Ori and the Blind Forest when they put out the complete edition of that game. And a lot of things that appear in Ori Will of the Wisps are actually things that they felt they needed more experience in before they made it in No Rest for the Wicked. So you have things like the Everglades, I think it's called in Will of the Wisps, where you're helping out all of the people there, you're helping out NPCs, and through doing that, you're kind of making the Everglades change shape. You're adding to them, you're restoring them. And that's something that I hope we see in No Rest for the Wicked. They mentioned that that was a thing that they did. Even side quests. They experimented with side quests in Will of the Wisps because that's something they wanted to do in No Rest for the Wicked. So I thought that that was really interesting that Will of the Wisps for these devs was like a training ground almost to prepare them from going to Metroidvania to this Souls-like ARPG and then going from 2D to 3D and going from these whimsical kind of characters in this whimsical world to a world that they describe as very Games of Thrones-y. It's very Game of Thrones, it's very Shakespearean, and it's a very gray story. There's going to be a lot of moral quandaries, story arcs, conflicts, questions that you go through in No Rest for the Wicked. So I am exceedingly excited to see what they do with that because I'm telling you, man, listen to these developers. They just get it. They just get it. This game is going to be phenomenal. Now, we did also learn from the most recent IGN video with the Moon Studio devs that this is going to be an early access game. Now, I know a lot of people don't necessarily see early access games in the most favorable light, but I think that this is going to be much more akin to games like Baldur's Gate or Hades, for example. Both of those games were in early access, and they were in early access because the developers behind those games love optimization, they love taking feedback, and they love putting that feedback into the game and changing how the game is based on what people are saying. And that is what the Ori devs said. They said that they want to do early access because even with the different editions of Ori, the things that they've changed in that game came from people's feedback. So this time around, they wanted to have players giving their feedback right there in development, not after the game is out. They wanted it to be a part of the development process. And I think that is really exciting because we've seen that when there are developers that do early access because they are incredibly passionate about getting feedback and optimizing and perfecting their game, and that's why they chose early access, that it can create phenomenal games. So I'm hoping it's not out in March because March is very, very busy and packed already. But I can't wait. This game definitely shot up to one of my most anticipated right from when I saw it at the Game Awards. Because listen, I think any of us who have played the Ori games were like, this is by the Ori devs? Take my money. Because there's just so much that they understand. So make sure to mark your calendars. March 1st, 9 a.m. Pacific. Come watch the showcase with me and come get your mind absolutely blown when I play the gameplay, because I know I'm going to love it. I'm so confident. I trust these devs with my life. Thank you guys so much for watching. Keep it tuned for some more No Rest for the Wicked information and gameplay coming up on Friday. Goodbye.